Today I am installing the uprated recirculation valve from Mountune. Alright, the first thing I'm going to do is remove this under tray that's under the car. I've already got it up on my race ramps. This requires removing quite a few Torx screws and a few plastic clip things. So this is an example of one of the Torx screws. It is T30 Torx, and if I move over here, you can kind of see this is an example of one of the plastic E-clips, and we're just going to use a flathead screwdriver to kind of pry that out and off. So that little black plastic thing with the like vacuum line type thing coming off it, that is what we were replacing. That is the stock recirculation valve. So the first thing that we need to do is we need to unclip that little clip thing that is on the vacuum line and just pull it off of the valve. So just a set of pliers, crimp those, and that should release, that should loosen that little like clamp, and then just pull the little hose off, and then we can move on to getting the actual bolts out. And they are, I believe they are T30 Torx. There are 3 of them, and we just take them off. And then while we're taking them off, especially the last one, we sort of need to hold on to the valve because it is spring loaded. It will just sort of pop off, and then that'll be the stock part off, and we can move on to getting the Mountune part on. Okay, so you can see I've got this off. It was just on this sort of nipple thing that's coming off the valve. So now we're just gonna get at these here, T30 Torx, and get these off. Yeah. So I'm on the last bolt here. I've got it loosened, and I've taken the extension, the little short extension, off of the ratchet, and I'm just going to do this by hand because it's loose, and with my other hand I'm holding the valve itself. Because it's spring loaded, you can see it's sort of trying to push against me, just so that it doesn't like fly off. And so with one hand we're undoing and one hand holding, or also catching this bolt whenever it comes off, which is now. So get rid of that very carefully. Off she comes, and get this all out of here. That's it out. So here's a little side-by-side comparison of the stock valve and the Mountune valve. You can see the difference in thickness is quite huge. Difference in materials. This is like a little rubber diaphragm that's really thin and flimsy, a really quite easy to push spring, and very, very thin piece of plastic, versus one enclosed unit made of really nice, strong aluminium. So as well as that, I mean, this is quite a stiff actuator versus this loosey-goosey diaphragm and really weak sort of spring setup. So the idea behind this is that the stock part is fine for stock power, but once you start upgrading your power, this is a wee bit flimsy and just could fail, I suppose. So you need to upgrade the part, and that's what the Mountune piece provides. As far as sound goes, it is just a recirculation valve. It's not like a blow-off valve or anything like that. It's not going to be venting any air to atmosphere, so sound-wise, I'm not really too sure if there's going to be much of a difference. There might be a little bit of a flutter with this actuator, maybe just initially, but honestly, I don't really think there's going to be much of a sound difference. It's not the point. It's all about performance and reliability. So installation should be pretty simple, just the exact opposite of what we just did. Get it in place, put the 3 bolts back in, put our little hose back on the end, and then we're done. Okay, so one thing to note before we get up in there is that there's this little rubber gasket which obviously sits in this groove, and that is kind of sort of loose in the package. Make sure that doesn't fall out, make sure it's in the groove before we get that up there, make sure it's in there as we get that on there, otherwise it won't form a good seal, so just be careful of that. Okay, so there it is, that's all the bolts in and tightened. So a point to note about the tightening of these bolts, they are aluminium bolts, so if you overdo it, you will strip them out. Mountune, they don't say that you need to use a torque wrench because the amount of torque is so small. I think somewhere it's written like 3 Newton meters, which essentially translates to hand tight. So just use your senses. Once it feels tight, it's tight and it's done. So just do it hand tight and you're good to go. Last thing we need to do is reconnect this little hose thing, clamp it down with the little clamp that's already on there. So there we go, that's the little hose thing back on the end of it, and that is installation complete. Okay, so now that we have that installed, we just need to reinstall our under tray. So we just get it hooked back up in there, and then we get all of our little torque screws back on and our 4 little like push clips. So the first part of reinstallation of the under tray is getting part of the felt under this metal bit right here. Near the back at either side, you just put the felt under or over, whichever way your face is oriented at the time. And then that is the first stage, and that should be all our holes lined up like that. And then we just need to reinsert all of our fixings. One last thing to note whilst putting the under tray back on, this plastic bit in the sort of middle near the rear, where 2 of the plastic push pins come out of and obviously therefore have to go back in whenever we're putting it back on, they sort of attach onto like a plastic thing that's back here that's on like on a brace, and it's kind of loosey-goosey. So whenever you have this off, this could very well move around, and if it goes too far that way or too far that way and then you put the under tray back in place, you're not going to be able to get that back into the middle position because the under tray will block it. So just make sure that that is all aligned before you put the under tray back up into place, and you should be good to go. Well, that's installation complete of the Mountune recirculation valve. Installation wasn't too hard, it didn't take too long, just a wee bit fiddly up in there, but really not too bad. So as far as sound, I mentioned sound earlier, I'll put in a little clip now. Well, there we go. That is it, that is the install done. I hope you liked it, I hope you liked the video. Please do like, share and subscribe for more content to come very, very soon. Thank you once again, goodbye.